Okay. Well, I'm going to introduce myself again. My name is Sharon Roderick, and you are Florence. And we're here, and we're going to do this interview for the Prescott Historical Society.
Yes.
Because you've lived in Prescott most of your life, and we're really interested in you and your house and all the wonderful things you've seen and done here. So, maybe we're going to start with your childhood, and then work our way through up to adult life. I'm going to ask you some questions about your dad and the bridge and different communities.
Yes.
And then we're going to talk a little bit more about the house itself. That's been real interesting to see. We saw the picture earlier, how much your house has changed. So
oh, yes, definitely.
Okay. Well, you said you were born in midway between here and River Falls.
On a farm.
On a farm in River Falls, and you moved here when you were 6?
Between 6 and 7. I went to 1 year to school in the country school, and I started school in the 2nd grade here.
Okay.
My dad bought this house, I think, in 1912 or 1913.
What did you think of school when you were real young?
Well, I always liked school very much.
You went to the country school, you said?
Just 1 year.
Just 1 year? And when you came here, where did you go to school?
Prescott School.
The Prescott school? Was there just one?
There was just one school there, and it was a beautiful old brick building, as I remember it now. And there was a great big clock on top that had been given to the school by a Mrs. Bailey.
Oh, okay.
And there was a 1st and 2nd grade downstairs, the 3rd and 4th, and the 5th and 6th. Upstairs was the 7th and 8th in high school. And this bell controlled our lives because the school had started at 8:30 in the morning, and that bell would ring. And then 9 o'clock, that was the last bell, and we were all supposed to be in school.
You liked it there then?
Yes, very nice. And I remember we didn't have pencil sharpeners then. And when we had a Mr. Jones that was a lovely janitor. He was just a sweet old fellow. And we would line up at recess. We'd line up with our pencils, and he'd sharpen our pencils.
Oh, really?
The pencil sharpeners weren't heard of at that time.
Oh, wow. What was recess like? What did you guys do during recess? Anything?
Well, recess. Well, we'd play ball, and there was a railing around a certain part there, and I know we'd use that sort of as turn somersaults on it and everything like that. And we weren't very ladylike, and I certainly wasn't. I was an old tomboy.
Oh, that sounds like fun.
It was fun. And the 3rd and 4th grade, we had a teacher by the name of Miss Williams, and she was very good at putting on drills. So I have a picture over there of when we put on a drill, a flag drill, and she was very, very good at that. And I felt as if I knew secrets, because my dad, Mr. Shear was my dad's best friend, and he was engaged to Miss Williams, and I knew that he had given her a diamond, but they had promised, I had to promise that I wouldn't tell the rest of the kids about it.
Oh my goodness. Small town schools like that must be fun. You get to know everybody.
Everybody. You knew everybody in town.
And what were drills?
Pardon?
What were drills?
They were marches.
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 This is like fun. What did the children do for recreation during the summer and the winter? Did you guys go study?
Well, 3rd grade is right. We call this 3rd grade out here. And nobody during the winter went up with their sleds or anything like that. That was just for kids to slide down. We all had flexible flyers.
Oh, okay.
And we went skating when it was due, and we went skiing. We did everything that they did in the wintertime. We did.
Did you guys ever skate out on the river?
Yes. You see, sometimes it would be beautiful skating, especially after the lake froze and there was no snow. And then we could skate way, way up the lake. And I remember one time I skated way up the lake, and the wind was blowing, and it just took us up. And one by one, they turned around and come back. But I didn't. I kept on skating. And then when I did turn around, I thought I was never going to get home. Finally, I saw a little figure coming up, skating up the lake, and it was Mr. Gould, he lived in our apartment here, and he skated up to get me, and he pushed me home.
How old were you then?
Oh, I must have been about maybe in the 5th grade.
What type of things did you guys do during the summer?
Well, of course, we would swim all summer, and of course, all the kids that lived near the lake, they could go near the water, and occasionally somebody on the hill would want to come down, and their parents would say, yes, you can go down and stay with Florence, but you can't go near the water. And that'd be the first place we'd go for.
Oh.
And my brother had a canoe, and I had a canoe, and I used my brother's. Oh, we just had a lot of fun in the summertime.
Oh,
just lots. And then Prescott was a great town for baseball. We had a city team, and every Sunday we would go to baseball games.
Sounds like fun. Did you ever play baseball or softball yourself?
Oh, sure. We all did. Well, we played baseball right out here in front of my house, because you see, Steamboat Inn wasn't there. There was a hall there, and so there was a tree that we used for baseball, and then on the sidewalk there was another tree that was second base, and then across the street was a telephone pole, and that was third base. And we play right out in the street, but of course there weren't cars going by then. And besides that, number 10 didn't turn in here; it went right straight up the hill.
Oh, okay. Okay. You know, I heard about the Croydale Center. Was that where the Steamboat is?
No.
No.
There used to be a hall over there.
Okay.
The Oddfellows Hall, and that was everything. All our activities were centered there, because high school didn't have a gym, they didn't have an auditorium, but that had we played all our basketball games there, and all the dances were there, and the plays were there. It was just used for everything.
Was it the adults? Did they use it for everything?
Oh yes, Oddfellows Hall, I think that was a organization, like the Masons and so forth. Okay. Yeah. And up on 3rd floor they had their rooms for their lodge, and then on 2nd floor there was a great big dining room, and on the main floor, that was where they played basketball or had silent movies, or they had plays, or just everything, because that was the only place in town to meet.
That sounds so fun. But it was so close to you, right?
Very close to me.
Next door, you could have parties all the time.
All the time, yes.
Oh, that sounds like so much fun. I was going to ask you, what type of chores did you do when you were a child?
Well, I hate to tell you, I can't remember that I ever had to do any. I think I had, once in a while I had to wipe dishes and occasionally make beds, but I don't think I ever had chores that I had just simply had to do.
What did your dad do when you were younger?
Well, my dad was a farmer, and then he came to town, and he worked in the city a couple of years, and then he and Mr. Shearer decided that it would be nice if we had a toll bridge here, because Hudson had a toll bridge, and they were raking in the money, and so they formed an organization and sold stock, and there was a ferry here, and they bought the ferry out, and they built the bridge.
Oh, that's right. I had heard about that. I was going to ask you some more questions about that a little further down. I wanted to ask you, we've got some questions about that, and the gear house and so forth, your involvement and all of that. I was going to ask you just a few more questions about Prescott, too. There was a history of Prescott schools written by, I think it's Mary Beeler.
Mary Beeler, yes.
Did you know her at all?
Oh, yes, she's a fine girl.
What can you tell me about her?
Well, she's a local girl, and she's very interested in history, and she has written a book on the history of Prescott. Okay. And she's real interesting in that, and she's a very fine girl.
Did you contribute to the book?
I don't think I did. No, I think it wasn't that extensive. Okay.
Before you were talking about you taught in River Falls, and did you ever teach in Prescott?
Yes, I taught in Prescott too, because when I was teaching in Beloit, my parents were getting real old, and I thought I should come home. So then I worked in the post office, and then they asked me if I wouldn't like to come up and teach 3 days at high school here, and I did.
What
The
type
girls.
of things did you teach?
I taught Phi Ed.
Oh, you taught Phi Ed? Oh, fun. Did you teach any, did you have any after-school activities that you helped teach?
Yes, I think I had the Girls Athletic Association. And you remember that was a time, you can't remember that. But the time I graduated from high school in 1925, and I went to lacrosse in 1926. And after, we could play other schools, but after 1926, they passed that law, that WIAA, that no girls could play in other schools.
Oh.
And that went on until many, many years. Hard to remember that. You just had to have intramural sports. And then we had what they call play days. And we could take kids to play days, but Prescott couldn't play River Falls, or River Falls couldn't play Ellsworth, and that went on for a long time.
I had never heard that.
Yeah, that's true.
Interesting.
And that I was teaching here in high school when I think the WIAA did away with that ruling, and then they could play other schools.
Everybody was really happy about that.
Yes, they were. Of course they were.
Oh, wow. You've had a really exciting life.
Yes, I have had.
It sounds like so much fun. Oh my gosh. Well, you said you taught high school like 3 days a week, and you taught the Phi Ed. Did you teach anything else?
3 days a week, no. Not to all girls.
Okay. You know, before we were talking about your dad and the bridge, we were going to ask too, how did the bridge come about? You said your dad and
Mr. Shear.
Mr. Shear bought out the ferry and then started.
Well, they didn't buy the ferry.
Oh, they didn't?
No, they formed the stockholders, and they sold stock.
Okay.
And there were many, many people in Prescott were interested, and then they bought out the ferry, and then they built the bridge.
Okay. What kind of memories do you have of that?
Of the bridge?
Yeah.
Oh, I have a lot of fond memories about that bridge.
Can you tell me?
And pardon?
Can you tell me about some?
Well, I'll tell you about the opening of the bridge.
Sure.
Prescott was just swarming with cars, just swarming, because they had a big day here to celebrate. And I think they had 2 or 3 bands playing all day, and they had a baseball game, all kinds of activities, but the one that I loved the best was at the St. Paul Turnverein. Do you know what a Turnverein is?
No, I don't.
That's a German gymnastics society years ago. Anyway, they had a strong one in St. Paul, and they came down on a boat and docked down by the levee, and then they marched up to the park and put on a great big exhibition, and I just loved that. And then in the afternoon, right where the steamboat inn is now, they had a pageant, and we had a lady from Prescott who was very good at putting on pageants, Mrs. Coleman. And she had asked me if they asked me if I wouldn't christen the bridge. So she told me to take a boat and go out in the middle of the St. Croix and the Mississippi and fill it half full of Mississippi water and half full of St. Croix water, which I did faithfully. And then they had a pageant, and that consisted of drills and the maypole dance and songs and speeches. And they had also elected a very pretty girl from Prescott that was like our queen, Sloan Welch. And then at the conclusion of the pageant, she led the way down to the bridge, and all her court following her and all the people, and then I broke the bottle over the end of this bridge and christened it Sloan of the St. Croix.
Oh, that's.
And then they had a dance afterwards, a big dance in the hall, and then I don't think we had the pavilion then.
Was the park was over on the other side of the bridge at that time too, or was
No, the park wasn't. No, that park didn't exist then.
No.
That's no.
That's my memory.
Yeah, that's your memory, sure. It just used to be woods over there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they just fixed that recently, and that's a lovely place.
It really is. Well, you know, he was talking about how your dad organized everything, and do you remember anything about the gear house?
Well, the gear house, that was on top of the bridge, and that was the machinery that lifted the bridge up and down.
Right.
It was a lift bridge.
Well, we wanted to know more about the Gear House. It's like, I think it's on the historic register, isn't it?
Yes, I think it is.
It is. Do you have any memories of the Gear House? I mean, I know it was really important for lifting the bridge.
Well, that's all I have memories of. It was all machinery was up there. And then there were two, I don't know what you'd call them, on each side of the bridge that lifted the bridge up. And there were steps up there. And then there were wheels that lifted the bridge. And I remember I was always afraid of heights. So everybody else would climb to the top of the bridge there, and I wouldn't. One day Dad bothered my father because he wasn't afraid of heights at all. So he said, you come down the bridge when nobody's here. And I said, yes, I would. And he said, now you climb to the top of that bridge. And he said, don't look down. Just climb up. And I remember I climbed up and I lay just flat in that little platform. And I wiggled around and I came down. But I climbed up it anyway.
Oh, wow. Must have been a really good day. A really good feeling.
But kids didn't bother them, but heights always bothered me.
Oh, wow.
Oh, and then another time, my very good friend and I, 4th of July, we decided that we would dive off the bridge to celebrate 4th of July. Well, she just sailed right off that bridge and made a beautiful entry. And I got down and looked, and I thought, my gosh, that water's a long ways from here. I think I'll just crawl over the side of the bridge and hang from one of those girders and drop in. Well, I climbed over and I hung there, and I was frightened. I got scared, and I never could chin myself. There I hung, couldn't get up, couldn't get down. Finally, they told my father, and Dad came over and he said, Florence, you better let go. So I did, and I entered the water feet first.
What did your father have to say about that afterwards?
Oh, nothing. I can't remember anything happened about that.
Oh, fun. Well, we were going to ask you some questions about your membership in the Prescott Area Historical Society. How did you first get involved with that?
With the Historical Society? Oh, my goodness. I was kind of interested in the history of Prescott, and it just started out very small, and I guess it's growing quite rapidly, and they have a nice new historical old bank building that they have purchased. I think it's very nice. I haven't been up to see it, but I hope to get up there sometime.
Okay, you'll have to come up and review this videotape.
Pardon?
You'll have to come up and review the videotape and
yes.
see everything.
I'd like to see it.
It's gonna be fun. Well, you know, you've worked with a lot of people probably over the years. Have you worked with any volunteers or done any volunteering yourself that's real memorable for you?
Well, I must have, but I can't think of anything right now.
That's okay.
That's
perfectly okay. Well, I was going to ask you a few more questions about the churches in this area. What can you tell me? Do you have any memories, like parties or any type of things in the churches?
Yes. Well, I belong to UCC Church up here, and I can remember when the old one. I think I can remember when this new one was built, 1915, I think. And we always went to Sunday school. And another thing, there used to be a man in Prescott by the name of Matt Dill. And he had made his money on buying grain, I think, and selling it in the East. And he was quite wealthy. And every year he would have an excursion for everybody. And everybody in town could go on that excursion. Everybody in town, free. And I can remember the lady, of course the men, they had to work, I suppose. They going down to Levee and with their baskets of picnic baskets. And then we'd all go on the excursion, and the older girls, I was younger then, they'd always ask Uncle Matt if they could dance. And then he'd say, yes, that'd be fine. So then somebody always said, play the piano, and everybody would dance. And that was a big day, a big excursion. I think we went to Red Wing and came back.
That sounds like fun too.
It was.
Did Did you do that more than once? Or?
Oh, he hired every year.
Every year.
Every year. And it was not only for anybody in Prescott. He happened to go to our church, but didn't make any difference. Anybody in town could go.
Oh, wow. Sounds like a very generous man.
He was a very generous man.
Were you involved with, I know you said UCC, but were you involved in any church organizations or?
Well, I had the Scouts here for many years.
Girl Scouts?
Girl Scouts, yes,
What can you tell me about that?
Well, I remember one time we went to Red Wing, and I don't know why we had that was an awful trip, but the fathers all went down and we had 2 tents. And have you ever been to Red Wing?
Yes, I have.
Not Barnesville, but there's another park, another bluff up there. Well, we pitched our tents way up there, and if that wasn't crazy. And I was so dumb that I didn't know that an oil stove had to be even before all 3 burners worked. And I had 1 burner for about 30 girls, trying to feed 30 girls. And it was a disaster. We had a lot of fun, but those poor kids. Then one day, the Scouts had invited us from Red Wing had invited the Scouts from Prescott down. So we went down, and I thought, well, maybe we'll take a shortcut up. We'll go right straight up the hill instead of way around that hill, the road and walk up. Well, my goodness, I think everybody was crying, including me, by the time we got there at the top, because it was just brush and everything that we had to climb through. But it was fun.
How many years were you a Girl Scout leader?
Oh, I can't remember. I wouldn't know.
Do you remember how you first got involved with it?
Well, I think that was many, many years ago, and I think I started the Girl Scouts. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's really interesting. Girl Scouts is personally interesting to me.
But that's many, many years ago.
Oh.
It's hard for me to remember things.
That sounds like a lot of fun. You know, in 1923, there was an art school here, and it was run by Dr. Josephine Rollins and Helen Drewley?
Yes, and that's a picture of her right there, that Josephine Lutz. She became the head art instructor at the University of Minnesota.
Okay.
And she painted that picture while they were here, and it was in a cottage that a friend of mine bought. And because I'd found the cottage and it was such a nice cottage, and that picture was there, she gave me the picture. And the university asked me once if I wouldn't let them, well, she resigned, or she didn't resign, but she retired. And they asked if they couldn't have that picture to display. But I was out of town. I was out west. By the time I got home, everything was over with. So I would have been glad to have let them have it. Okay. I hope to give that to the Historical Society when I'm gone. The boys are supposed to give it to her. Give it to them.
What other type? Were you ever involved in the art school yourself?
No. Goodness, no.
Oh, what type of things do you remember about it, the art school itself?
Well, I just remember that they had it up in Helen Drewley's place, and I really don't remember much about it, to tell the truth.
Well, do you have any other information to give me about Prescott and growing up here?
Well, I think it was a good place to grow up.
Sounds like it.
Yes, a lot of fun. And having the lake for a recreation park, I think it was a great place to grow up.
Do you have any questions for me?
No, I have any questions for you.
Okay. Well,
how did you get involved in this?
How did I get involved in this? Well, I'm a history student too at River Falls, and one of my professors asked me if I'd maybe want to think about doing this, and then Amy came to talk to me, and I said yes, I'd like to do this. I like talking to people.
Good.
And all that stuff, so I get to talk to people such as yourself and ask questions.
Well,
That's
nice.
How I got into this. But I want to thank you very much for your time.
You're very welcome, I'm sure. I hope I could contribute something to it.
Well, I'm sure you have. Thanks.
You're very welcome. Goodbye.
It was taken at the Odd Fellows Hall in Prescott. Florence is the fifth person from the left.
I could get into this whole hall. So Dad and Mr. Price, we went over, and I crawled right, this is a very poor picture of that hall, I crawled right in that window, and then I came around and opened the door for them. They built an addition onto
This is the
school,
Prince
and they had a gymnasium.
Pierce County School. Florence is the first row on the left. She was in the first grade in that school.
Because then all the state teachers' colleges were noted for different things, you know. And across was Fayette.
Oh, okay.
And River Falls was the Egg.
Yep.
Miss Branson was a Fayette teacher. And then after that, I kept it, so every chicory I went to, I'd ring that bell, and then the people had to come out and treat us.
That's a good idea. Perfect.
And that old clock out there, that's an old Seth Thomas.
This is Florence's parents.
And my granddad threw that away, and my